She told me to wipe my boots and hide in the basement while she toasted to her success in my living room. My daughter-in-law thought I was just a relic, a piece of old furniture that didn't fit her modern aesthetic. She didn't realize that while she was busy polishing the glass walls, I was the one who just bought the sledgehammer. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It reminds me that I'm not invisible. They thought they were evicting a helpless pensioner. They were about to find out they had just invited the demolition crew to dinner. Let me tell you how a cup of coffee started the war. The rain in November felt different than the snow in January. Snow sat on top of you, heavy but honest. It was a burden you could see, a weight you could shovel. Rain was insidious. It got inside you. It was a soaking gray chill that found the microscopic cracks in your jacket, bypassed the wool of your sweater, and settled deep into your marrow. I sat in the cab of my truck, a 10-year-old Ford F-150 that was more scar tissue than metal. The suspension groaned when I shifted my weight, a familiar complaint I understood intimately. The cab smelled of sawdust, old coffee, and memories of better days, days when the passenger seat wasn't empty. The heater rattled, blowing lukewarm air that smelled faintly of dust and burnt wire. My hands gripped the steering wheel. My knuckles were white, the skin thin and translucent like parchment paper stretched over ancient bone. I watched a droplet trace a jagged path down the windshield, distorting the world outside. It meandered, hesitated, and then plunged, obeying the inevitable pull of gravity. I was staring at the house. It wasn't just a house, it was a statement. That's what my daughter-in-law Vanessa called it during the initial walkthrough, her heels clicking aggressively on the unfinished subfloor like a metronome counting down to a disaster. Glass walls that offered no shelter, sharp, aggressive angles that defied the natural curve of the land, a roofline that looked like a serrated knife trying to slice the gray sky open. It was beautiful, I suppose, if you appreciated the aesthetics of a surgical tool. It was cold, sterile, like a hospital built for billionaires who planned to live forever and needed nowhere to hide. But I spent 40 years looking at blueprints and balance sheets. I looked past the facade. I knew the soil report for this lot. I knew the drainage was poor, the water table too high for a slab foundation without extensive remediation. I knew that without the right deep earth pilings, expensive ones, the kind developers hate to pay for because they get buried in the dirt where no one sees them, that fancy glass box would eventually shift. Gravity doesn't care about your statement. Gravity doesn't care about your aesthetics or your net worth. Gravity only cares about physics. It waits. It applies constant, relentless pressure until the weakest point gives way. It exploits the tiniest fracture, the microscopic void in the concrete, the rusted rebar, just like the family living inside it. We were building on a swamp, and they were too busy polishing the glass to check the foundation. I could feel the tension in the air, a structural stress that exceeded the load-bearing capacity of our relationships. I was 62 years old. For 40 of those years, I worked as a forensic auditor for the state, and later for a boutique private firm specializing in large-scale infrastructure. I didn't just look at numbers. I looked at the steel they bought, the concrete they poured, and the hours they billed. I spent my life hunting down embezzlers who thought they were magicians. I traced shell companies through labyrinths of offshore accounts and nested LLCs. I found the truth hidden in the margins of ledgers, in the tiny variances between estimated load and actual cost. I was good at it. I was surgical. Men feared me when I walked into a boardroom with a battered leather briefcase. They knew I could see the cracks they had papered over. They knew I understood that numbers, like beams, have to balance. If they don't, something is going to fall. But when you turn 60, and when you lose your wife, the world stops seeing the expert. The world stops seeing the man who brought down corrupt mayors and crooked contractors. They only see the gray hair thinning at the temples, the slow, deliberate gait caused by knees that have carried too much weight for too long, the reading glasses perched on the nose. They see a relic, an artifact gathering dust in a museum no one visits anymore. They assume the mind has softened just because the skin has. I adjusted the rearview mirror, checking my face. The eyes were the same, steel blue, sharp, analytical, but the spark was dim. It was like looking at a lighthouse where the bulb had burned out, leaving only the cold glass reflecting a stormy sea. My wife Sarah died 2 years ago. When she left, the silence in our big Victorian home didn't just fill the rooms. It became a physical weight. It pressed down on my chest every night, sitting on my sternum like a stone. The house groaned in the wind, and for the first time I didn't know how to fix it. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like her footsteps, a cruel echo that led nowhere. Then the arthritis in my knees started, a grinding reminder of mortality with every step. The stairs became a daily battle I was losing. Then came the talk. My son Michael and Vanessa sat me down in my own living room. They brought wine, which should have been my first warning. Sarah and I drank coffee. Wine was for negotiations. They used soft voices, the kind you use on a frightened animal or a child you're about to disappoint. They talked about equity and downsizing and safety. They constructed a verbal narrative where selling Sarah's house, the house where Michael took his first steps, where I marked his height on the doorframe, was the only logical conclusion. They suggested I move into the guest suite of their new modern mansion, a multi-generational living arrangement, Vanessa called it. Put the proceeds in a joint investment account, Vanessa had said, her eyes gleaming with a hunger she tried to mask its concern. Secure the family legacy. Let the money work for you, Arthur. You've worked hard enough. I agreed, not for the money. I wanted to be close to them. I wanted to be close to my grandson, Leo. I wanted to believe that I still had a purpose, that I wasn't just debris left over from a demolished life. I opened the truck door. The rain hit my face like a slap, cold and disrespectful. It washed away the warmth of the cab, replacing it with the biting reality of November. I grabbed my duffel bag. It was high as canvas and frayed at the edges. It held everything I owned now, my life, condensed into 20 pounds of cotton and denim, books on structural engineering, a photo album, my meds, and a few shirts. I walked to the front door. It was massive, black, and devoid of a handle. A monolith. You had to type a code to enter. A digital gatekeeper for a digital life. Beep, 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 click. The solenoid retracted with a mechanical snap. A sound devoid of welcome. I stepped inside. The house didn't smell like dinner cooking or wood smoke. It smelled of expensive candles. Sandalwood, bergamot, and something chemical that stung the nose, but it didn't smell like a home. It smelled like the lobby of a hotel where you couldn't afford to stay, where the furniture was meant to be looked at, not used. Arthur, Vanessa's voice rang out from the kitchen, sharp and echoing off the hard surfaces. There was no warmth in it, only notification. It was the tone of a supervisor realizing a subordinate had arrived late. She didn't call me Dad. She never had. She called me Arthur. It always sounded professional, detached, like I was a subcontractor she had hired to fix a leak. And she wasn't happy with the estimate. Please take your boots off in the mudroom, she shouted, her voice bouncing off the glass walls. The floors were just refinished. Scandinavian white oak. It stains if you even look at it wrong. I looked down at my boots. Red Wings, oiled leather. They were clean. I had wiped them twice on the mat outside, a habit ingrained in me by Sarah, who would have skinned me alive for tracking mud. I respected wood. I knew how it expanded and contracted. I knew how to care for it. They're dry, Vanessa, I said, my voice feeling small in the cavernous, empty hall. I checked. Just to be safe, she called back, her tone brooking no argument. We have guests coming later. The aesthetic must be pristine. I sighed, the breath rushing out of me. I bent down, my knees popping loudly, a dry crack like a breaking twig in the quiet hall. The sound seemed to reverberate, amplifying my age. I tugged the boots off, my hands stiff. My socks felt slippery on the polished concrete floor of the mudroom. It felt like walking on ice, unstable and treacherous. I felt small, diminished, like a child in a stranger's house, afraid to touch the walls for fear of leaving a smudge. I was a structural defect in their perfect design, a relic that clashed with the decor. I walked into the kitchen. It was white, blindingly, aggressively white. The counters were white marble, the cabinets white lacquer, the floors white epoxy. It looked like an operating room waiting for a patient, or a morgue waiting for a body. There was no color, no life, just endless, sterile brightness. Vanessa was standing at the island, a slab of stone the size of a small car. She was typing furiously on her tablet, her manicured nails clicking like hail on glass. She was the CEO of Veritech, a lifestyle brand. She sold high-end organizing solutions, plastic boxes for rich people to hide their clutter, selling them the illusion that if they just bought the right container, their chaotic lives would make sense. She was always scaling, always pivoting, always loud. She spoke in buzzwords that floated in the air like exhaust fumes. Synergy, bandwidth, disruption. "We have a problem," she said, not looking up. Her eyes were locked on the screen, scanning a spreadsheet. Her brow was furrowed, not with worry but with calculation. "Hello to you too, Vanessa," I said, leaning against the doorframe to steady myself. The floor was cold through my socks. She ignored me. To her, pleasantries were inefficiencies. Time theft. "Michael, the caterer for Thanksgiving, wants another $2,000 because of the holiday rush. Something about premium sourcing for the organic heritage turkey. Can you handle it?" Michael was standing by the fridge, hidden in the shadow of the pantry. He was pouring himself a drink, amber liquid splashing over ice. It was 4:00 p.m. on a Tuesday. He looked tired. His expensive suit, tailored to convey power, looked heavy on his shoulders, like a costume that didn't fit. His face was pale, the skin slack around the jaw. He looked like a man who was slowly eroding. I don't know, Van," Michael said. His voice was soft. Too soft. It lacked the timbre of conviction. "The account is pretty low until the bonus comes in. We're stretched. The Tesla lease, the landscapers. Use the family trust," she said casually, swiping a finger across her screen, as if moving a chess piece. My ears perked up. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The family trust, that was my money. The proceeds from the sale of my house. The sweat of 40 years. The weekends I missed working overtime. The vacations we didn't take. It was supposed to be for emergencies, for medical bills, for Leo's college tuition. I stepped forward. The cold floor bit through my socks, chilling me from the feet up. "Vanessa," I said, keeping my voice level, channeling the tone I used to use when deposing a hostile witness. "The trust isn't for parties. It's not for premium sourcing. It's for the future. It's for Leo." She stopped typing. The clicking ceased. The silence that followed was heavy. She looked at me. Her eyes swept over my flannel shirt, my worn jeans, my socked feet. It was an appraisal, and I was coming up short. She looked at me not as a person, but as a liability on a balance sheet. She gave a look of mild disgust, mixed with pity, like she had found a stain on her white carpet that she would have to pay someone to remove. "Arthur," she sighed, a long exhale through her nose. It sounded like she was explaining gravity to a toddler, or tax law to a golden retriever. "This dinner is the future. We are hosting the acquisition team from Omnicorp," she continued, speaking slowly, enunciating every syllable. "If they like us, if they like the brand, the lifestyle, the projected success, they buy Veritech for millions. If they don't, we're stuck. The $2,000 is an investment. It's seed capital." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her mouth curved, but her gaze remained dead. It was a shark smile. "You audited construction firms in the 90s. Arthur, you used a calculator and a ruler. This is high finance. It's about image. Perception is reality. We are selling a dream, and dreams aren't cheap. If you spend money you don't have on a perception," I said, my voice dropping to a low rumble, the sound of tectonic plates grinding, "you don't become rich, you become broke. Physics applies to money too, Vanessa. Input must exceed output. If the load exceeds the capacity, the beam fails." She laughed. It was a sharp, brittle sound, like glass snapping. "Okay, Grandpa. Why don't you go check on Leo? He's playing video games in the media room. Leave the business to the adults." I felt the heat rise in my neck. I looked at Michael. I waited for him to speak. To stand up. To be the son Sarah and I raised. To say, "Don't talk to my father that way." To say, "That's his money, Vannon. We promised him." To be the man I raised him to be. Michael took a long sip of his drink. He looked at the floor, studying the grain of the Scandinavian white oak, unable to meet my gaze. "Just go rest, Dad. We got this. Please." I felt a crack form in my chest. It wasn't a metaphor. It was the distinct, sickening sound a support beam makes right before it snaps under a load. It was never designed to carry. My son was gone. He had been eroded by her ambition, worn down like a stone in a river. I walked down the hall to my suite. It was a glorified basement room, tucked behind the utility closet. No windows, just a high clerestory strip that let in a sliver of gray light. Vents hummed incessantly in the ceiling, the lungs of the house breathing recycled air. It felt like a bunker. I sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress was too soft. It offered no support. I looked at the framed photo of Sarah on my nightstand. She was smiling, squinting into the sun on a beach in Maine. Her hair was windblown, her eyes full of life. "They think I'm stupid, Sarah," I whispered to the glass. "They think I'm just an old man with a checkbook and a fading memory. But I wasn't stupid. I was just tired. Grief is exhausting. It takes energy just to keep your heart beating, when half of it is gone. I had managed payroll for 200 men on sites where a mistake meant death. I had negotiated contracts with union bosses who brought baseball bats to meeting. I knew how to spot a liar by the way they structured a bid, by the way they inflated the line items for miscellaneous. I could smell a kickback scheme in a pile of invoices. And Vanessa, she was structuring her life like a Ponzi scheme. She was moving air and calling it wind. She was building a skyscraper of cards in a wind tunnel. I lay back on the pillow, staring at the vents. I closed my eyes, but sleep didn't come. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part wasn't the money. It was that my son was watching her pour the gasoline, and he was handing her the match. The next morning, the war began. But it was a cold war, fought in silence and subtle gestures. I didn't fire a gun. I fired up my old skills. I became the auditor again. I walked into the kitchen at 6 a.m. The house was silent, the white surfaces glowing in the dawn light like spectral bones. I reached for my coffee canister. It was a cheap brand, Folgers, the kind Sarah and I drank for 30 years. It was a ritual. The smell was home. It was the one anchor I had left. It was gone. I checked the pantry. Nothing. I looked in the trash. A sleek, motion-activated stainless steel bin that opened with a soft hiss. There it was, my red tin sitting on top of potato peelings, full of grounds. Vanessa walked in, wearing a silk robe that shimmered like oil on water. She held a ceramic mug with both hands, looking serene. "Good morning, Arthur." I threw that tin out. It smelled burnt. It was permeating the upholstery in the living room. My jaw tightened until my teeth ached. My hands curled into fists at my sides. "That was my coffee, Vanessa. I bought it yesterday. It doesn't smell burnt. It smells like coffee." She pointed to a shiny chrome machine on the counter, a contraption that looked like part of a jet engine. "I bought you Nespresso pods. Use those. They're better. Imported, it creates a better crema. I don't like pods. They taste like plastic, and they cost $1 a cup." "It's my kitchen, Arthur," she said, her voice hardening, dropping the facade of politeness. "I don't want that red tin can on the counter. It messes with the aesthetic. We have an image to maintain, even at breakfast. The investors might drop by. The aesthetic, always the aesthetic." The god she worshipped. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I filled a pot with tap water, boiled it on the stove, and drank it hot and plain. I swallowed the hot water and I swallowed the anger. It burned going down, but I kept the count. 1 strike. I was an auditor. I documented everything, every slight, every penny, every lie. The file was open. "I'm going to the senior center," I announced later, putting on my heavy wool coat. "To play bridge." Michael looked up from his tablet at the kitchen table. He looked relieved. Relieved to have the reminder of his failure out of the house. Relieved to not have to look at me. "Good idea, Dad," he said, forcing a smile that looked painful. "Keep your mind active. Socialize. Maybe you'll meet some friends." I drove my truck. The engine roared to life, a rough, honest sound that vibrated through the floorboards. But I didn't go to the senior center. Bridge was for people who had accepted their retirement. Bridge was for the waiting room of the afterlife. I drove straight to the public library downtown, a brick fortress of silence. I went to the private study rooms in the back. I laid out my legal pad. I clicked my pen. I wasn't playing bridge. I was meeting a ghost from my past. Jim, the shark, Moretti. We grew up together on the rough side of town, where you learn to count cards before you learn to read. He went into corporate law, specializing in hostile takeovers. I went into auditing. We were two sides of the same coin. He broke things. I fixed them, but we both understood the anatomy of a wreck. He was retired now, but he still wore three-piece suits and smelled of expensive cigars and old leather. "Arthur," Jim said, standing up as I entered. He looked at me, his dark eyes narrowing, assessing me like a prize fighter checking an opponent. "You look like you're ready to punch someone, or sue them, or both." "I might be," I said, sitting down. I placed the notepad on the table. It was empty, but it wouldn't be for long. "I need you to teach me, Jim. I know construction fraud. I know payroll padding. I know how to find a ghost employee. But I need to know about corporate debt structures, leverage, distress financing. And I need to know about Veritech." Jim raised a thick gray eyebrow. "Your daughter-in-law's company? Trouble in Paradise." "She's bleeding cash," I said, leaning in, my voice low. "She's using my retirement fund as her personal piggy bank. She thinks I don't notice the withdrawals because she calls them management fees and portfolio adjustments. But I need to know how deep the rot goes. I need to know if the building is just leaning, or if it's already falling." Jim cracked a smile. It was predatory, showing teeth that had chewed up CEOs for breakfast. "I love a good hunt, especially when the prey is arrogant. There's nothing quite like the sound of a narcissist hitting the pavement." For the next month, I went to bridge 3 times a week. I sat in that library and learned a new language. EBITDA, liquidity ratios, convertible notes, mezzanine financing. I started digging into public records. I pulled UCC filings. I tracked vendor liens. I built a map of the money, and the map was terrifying. It was a spiderweb of debt, strung across a void. I needed inside information. The numbers on the public filings were cooked. I could smell the creative accounting from a mile away. The margins were too perfect. The growth curve was mathematically impossible. Jim gave me a name. I went to a diner near Veritech's office, a greasy spoon where the disgruntled employees went to drink coffee and complain about their bosses. Elena Rostov walked in at noon. She was small, with sharp, nervous eyes and hands that wouldn't stop fidgeting with her napkin. She looked like a bird sensing a cat. She kept checking the door, casing her phone. She used to be Veritech's head bookkeeper until she was fired 2 months ago for insubordination. I waved her over. "Mr. Callahan?" she asked, clutching her purse to her chest. "Call me Arthur." She sat down, looking over her shoulder. "Jim said you wanted to know about the creative accounting. If she finds out I'm talking to you, she has lawyers. She made me sign an NDA. I want to know where the money is going. Elena, all of it. I'm her father-in-law. I have a vested interest." She laughed bitterly. It was the sound of someone who had seen the curtain pulled back. "What money?" "There is no money, Arthur. It's a Ponzi scheme wrapped in a lifestyle brand. It's a hollow shell painted gold." "She pays the old vendors with the new loans," Elena whispered, leaning across the table, her voice trembling. "She gets a bridge loan from Bank A to pay off the supplier from last month, then borrows from Bank B to pay the interest on Bank A. She's borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, and Peter is coming to break her legs. She's drowning, and she's pulling everyone down with her." She slid a small, silver flash drive across the Formica table. "I kept a backup," she said, before she locked me out of the server. "Look at the marketing budget. It's not marketing, it's her lifestyle. The car, the clothes, the dinners, it's all expensed. She writes off her manicures as brand maintenance." "Why are you giving me this?" I asked, covering the drive with my hand. It felt cold against my palm. "Because she blamed me," Elena said, her eyes tearing up. Her voice trembled with rage. "When the cash flow dried up, she told the board I was incompetent. She ruined my reputation to save her own skin. She made me unhireable. Her pain was real. I recognized it. It was the same look I saw in the mirror. The look of someone discarded because they were no longer useful. We were the collateral damage of Vanessa's ego. I took the drive. She won't get away with it. I went home. I bypassed the white kitchen. I went to my basement suite. I plugged the drive into my laptop. I sat in the dark, the screen illuminating my face in a cold, blue light. I began to read. The numbers were worse than I thought. The company was insolvent. It was a corpse being propped up by credit cards. The burn rate was astronomical. But then, deep in a subfolder labeled Legal Misc, I found the document that stopped my heart. It was a PDF scanned at 2 a.m. 3 months ago. A second mortgage application on the big house. My house. The house. A house I had supposedly sold to them to secure the legacy. My name was on the deed, as a resident beneficiary, a clause I had insisted on. It was my safety net. She couldn't mortgage the property without my signature. It was the one piece of leverage I had retained. But there it was, Arthur Callahan, signed in messy black ink at the bottom of the page. My hands shook. I zoomed in until the pixels blurred. The loop of the A was wrong. The slant was too vertical. It lacked a tremor in the C that my arthritis caused. It wasn't just greed. It was a crime, a felony. She had forged my signature to get a high-interest loan from a predatory lender called Apex Capital. She had bet my home on her failing business. They didn't just steal my money. They stole my name. They took the one thing I had kept clean for 60 years, my integrity, my identity, and used it to underwrite their fraud. I felt a wave of nausea, physically sickened by the violation. I needed to know who helped her. Vanessa wasn't smart enough to forge a notarized deed alone. You needed a stamp. You needed a witness. You needed someone inside the system. I checked the notary stamp on the PDF. Robert J. Callahan. My breath stopped in my throat. The room spun. The walls of the small basement room seemed to close in. Uncle Robert, my brother, the gambler, the black sheep. The man who had borrowed money from everyone in the family and never paid a dime back. The man who had missed Sarah's funeral because he was at the track. I hadn't spoken to him in 10 years. Not since he tried to pawn Sarah's engagement ring while we were at a wake. I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach, heavier than the grief. It was a dense, dark mass. My own brother, helping her steal my home. My son stood by and watched. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was genetic. I needed to confront him. But I needed more leverage first. I needed to be the steel beam that wouldn't bend. I needed to be inevitable. The next day, I had to endure another indignity. A small one, but symbolic. I walked out to the driveway with my tool bucket, intending to fix a loose railing at the senior center. It was a lie, of course, but the bucket was real. My truck was gone. I looked to the street. There it was, parked halfway on the curb, looking abandoned. Leaves had already gathered on the windshield. A shiny new Tesla Model X, white and egg-shaped, was sitting in my spot in the driveway. It hummed softly. Charging. We needed the garage space for inventory, Michael explained, coming out of the house. He avoided my eyes, focusing on polishing the Tesla's door handle with a microfiber cloth. He rubbed the same spot over and over. The Tesla is a company car. It can't be parked on the street. Insurance reasons. And the charging port reaches better from here. My truck has tools in it, I said, pointing to the street. Expensive, precision tools. Micrometers, gauges. They'll get stolen. Just cover them up, Dad. It's temporary, just until the acquisition. Don't make a scene. I looked at my son. He was fading away. He was becoming a ghost in his own life, a hollow man, echoing his wife's demands. He was stripping away the parts of himself that were me, replacing them with compliance. I walked to the street. I covered my tools with a tarp. I felt the neighborhood watching. I felt the judgment of the streetlights. Vanessa sat me down on Sunday, right before the football game I wasn't allowed to watch on the main TV because it disrupted the flow of the living room. We need to restructure the cash flow, she said, tapping her tablet. She didn't offer a drink this time. The trust is tied up in long-term bonds. We can't liquidate without penalties. So we're putting you on a stipend. $200 a week for incidentals. Groceries, gas. 200? I laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound. That's my money, Vanessa. All of it. $300,000. You can't put me on an allowance with my own capital. It's invested, she yelled, losing her composure for a split second. Her voice cracked. Do you want to ruin the compound interest? Do you want to eat the tax penalties? We are doing this for you. I looked at her. I saw the panic behind the arrogance, the sweat on her upper lip. She needed that money to pay the interest on the Apex loan. She was terrified. I took the $200 cash she held out. I put it in my pocket. I didn't tell them that I had already moved the remaining bulk of my personal savings, the money I hadn't put in the trust, the insurance payout from Sarah's life policy, into a separate holding company. Jim helped me set up. They thought they had everything. They had nothing but the bait. I tracked Robert down. It wasn't hard. Gamblers are creatures of habit. They returned to the scene of the loss. He was working out of a rented storage unit on the south side of town, an industrial wasteland of corrugated metal and barbed wire. The wind whipped through the alleyways, carrying the scent of rust and decay. I parked my truck around the corner, hidden behind a dumpster overflowing with wet cardboard. I waited in the dark. The cold seeped through the floorboards, numbing my toes. I watched the unit for 3 hours. At midnight, a car pulled up, the Tesla. Its headlights cut through the gloom like lasers. The falcon wing door hissed open. Vanessa got out. She looked out of place in her designer coat among the rusted metal and oil stains. She looked like a spaceship that had landed in a junkyard. She handed Robert a thick manila envelope. He counted the cash right there under the sodium street lamp. He laughed. It was a sickening, wheezing sound. A sound of relief, not joy. Vanessa drove away, the electric whine of her car fading into the night. Robert turned to open his storage unit. I stepped out of the shadows. My boots crunched on the gravel. "Hello, Bob." He jumped, dropping his keys. He spun around, his hand going to his pocket. For a second I thought he might have a weapon. "Arthur?" He squinted against the darkness. He looked old, worn out. His face was a roadmap of bad decisions. His eyes were red and watery, the whites jaundiced. "What are you doing here?" he stammered. I thought you were asleep. Or dead. You look like a ghost. I saw the deed, Bob. The notary stamp. State of Illinois. Robert J. Callahan. His face went pale, the color of wet ash. I can explain. It was just a formality. Helping family. You forged my signature. You helped her steal my house. The house Sarah died in. The house you were banned from entering. I had debts, he shouted, his voice cracking. Gambling debts. Bad people, Arthur. Not banks. Sharks. They were going to hurt me. They were going to break my fingers. So you hurt me instead? I stepped closer. You sold your brother for an envelope of cash. You sold your soul to save your fingers. She said you wouldn't know. She said you were losing it. That you were senile. That it didn't matter because the company was going to make millions. Open the unit, I said. My voice was ice. What? Open it. He fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking so hard he dropped them twice. Clatter, clatter. Finally he unlocked the padlock. The metal door rolled up with a screech that sounded like a scream. Inside, it wasn't empty. It was full of cardboard boxes. Hundreds of them. Floor to ceiling. All labeled Veritech Inventory, Q4. I walked in. I took a pocket knife from my belt. I sliced the tape on the nearest box. I opened it. Bricks. Red, common construction bricks. I opened another. Newspapers. Old telephone books. She's faking the inventory, I whispered. She ships these out to look like sales volume, then you ship them back as returns or restocking. It creates a paper trail of movement. It pumps the revenue numbers, Robert said, looking at his feet. For the investors, just until the buyout, it's called channel stuffing. But heavier. I took out my phone. I took photos. Detailed, high-resolution photos of the shipping labels, the bricks, the return manifests. I photographed the notary stamp, sitting on his desk. You're going to help me, Bob. I can't. She pays me. If I stop, the loan sharks. I'm not asking, I said. I stepped into his personal space. I was older, but I was stronger. I was made of ironwood. He was made of rock. You're going to sign an affidavit, admitting the forgery, admitting the fake inventory. Or I take these photos to the police right now. And the guys you owe money to, they'll find you in jail just as easily. Probably easier. Robert looked at the bricks. He looked at the envelope of cash in his hand. He looked at me. He saw 40 years of disappointment in my eyes. He slumped, defeated. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, Artie. Just don't let them kill me." I had the weapon. Now I needed the target. I felt no satisfaction, only a cold resolve. I was demolishing the building, and my brother was just a loose brick I had to remove. I went back to the library the next day. The rain was pouring again, drumming against the windows like a relentless drumbeat. Jim was waiting in the study room. He was with a new man, Elias Thorne. Elias was a fixer, a lawyer who specialized in distressed assets and corporate ruins. He wore a suit that cost more than my truck, and he had eyes that looked like calculators. He didn't blink often. "Arthur," Jim said, sliding a folder across the table, "we have news, big news, the kind of news that changes the game." "Apex Capital," Elias said, his voice smooth and deep, like a cello. "The predatory lender holding Vanessa's second mortgage and the bridge loans. What about them?" "The owner died last week. Heart attack on his yacht," Elias said, without emotion. "The estate is in chaos. They are liquidating the entire high-risk portfolio to settle estate taxes. They are fire-selling the bad debt." "What does that mean?" I asked, leaning forward. "It means her debt is for sale," Elias said, "for pennies on the dollar. They just want the cash out. They classify her loans as toxic assets, due to the payment history." I looked at the numbers Elias had circled. Vanessa owed $4 million across 3 loans, but the portfolio bundle classified as junk was selling for $1 million cash. I checked my hidden accounts, the insurance money from Sarah, my life savings, the rainy day fund, the money I had saved for a lakeside cabin we never bought. I had exactly $1.1 million. "Can I buy it?" I asked. My throat was dry. "It's risky," Jim warned, tapping his pen on the table. "If she goes bankrupt before the acquisition, you lose it all. You're buying bad debt. You're buying a burning house." "She won't," I said. "Omnicorp is buying her in 3 days. She's desperate to keep the lights on until then. She will do anything to keep the facade up." "If she gets acquired," Jim said, "Omnicorp pays off the debts. You get paid back fully. You make $3 million profit instantly." "And if she doesn't?" "You own the debt," Elias said. "You become the senior creditor. You can foreclose. You can seize assets. You effectively own the company. You hold the keys to the kingdom, or the ruins." I sat back. I thought about the coffee, the truck parked on the street, the forgery, the look in Michael's eyes when he told me to go rest. I thought about the house, Sarah's house. "Buy it," I said. "We need an entity name," Elias said, opening his laptop, "for the LLC. Something anonymous." I looked out the window at the rain-soaked trees. "Ironwood Holdings," I said. "Ironwood Holdings," I said. "Ironwood Holdings," I said. "Ironwood?" Elias asked. "It's the tree in the backyard," I said. "Sarah loved it. It's the hardest wood there is. It ruins chainsaws. It doesn't rot, and it never breaks. It just waits. It endures the storm, and it outlasts the fire." The transaction cleared in 24 hours. I was now the invisible tenant. I owned the roof over my head. I owned the floor under their feet. I owned the very air they breathed, and they had no idea. They were still walking on the ice, and I was the one holding the thermostat. A week before Thanksgiving, I gave Michael one last chance. I had to. He was the son. Even if the structure is failing, you try to shore it up one last time before you condemn it. I found him in the garage. He was hiding from the decorators who were draping silk over the banisters. He was sitting on a toolbox, head in his hands. "Mike," I said. He looked up. He looked haunted. His eyes were rimmed with red. "Is she really going to sell the company?" I asked softly. "Yes," he said, his eyes wild, darting around as if looking for an exit. "Omnicorp. They're coming for Thanksgiving dinner. They're signing the letter of intent that night. It's a done deal, Dad. Once they sign, we're out. We're safe." "And the debts?" I asked. "The mortgages, the inventory, the things Uncle Robert is doing, all covered," he said quickly. "Too quickly. We'll be free. We're going to buy a place in the Hamptons. We're going to start over." I stepped closer. I put a hand on his shoulder. I felt him trembling. Mike, look at me. If you're lying to me, if you're in trouble, tell me now. We can fix it. I can help you. I know how to fix broken things. I can get lawyers. We can go to the authorities together. He pulled away violently. Anger flashed in his eyes. The defensive anger of a man who knows he is wrong. Stop treating me like a kid, he shouted, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. We don't need your help. We don't need your lecture. We're rich, Dad. Get that through your head. We are the winners here. You just don't understand how the world works now. He stormed out, slamming the door. The sound was final. I stood in the cold garage, the smell of exhaust and lies hanging in the air. Okay, I said to the empty air. Then you'll face the consequences like an adult. I tried, I really tried, but you can't save someone who loves the fire. You can't reinforce a column that has already crumbled to dust. The house was staged like a movie set. A string quartet played softly in the corner of the living room, their music struggling to fill the sterile void. Waiters in white coats passed hors d'oeuvres that looked like art and tasted like nothing. Foam, gel, illusion. The lighting was dimmed to hide the flaws in the finish. The Omnicorp team arrived at 6:07 p.m. Mr. Sterling, the CEO, looked around. He was a man made of granite and expensive tailoring. He moved with the weight of billions. Bert. Impressive, he said, nodding at the view of the city lights. Through the glass walls. I was wearing my best suit. It was navy blue. 20 years old, but I had it pressed. It fit me loosely now. I had lost weight in the last month. Arthur, Vanessa hissed in my ear as we walked to the table. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in like talons. She smelled of nervous sweat masked by Chanel. Please, don't talk about construction. Don't talk about the old house. Just eat and smile. And don't embarrass us. Do not ruin this. I know the drill, Vanessa, I said. Smile and wave. We sat down. The table was 10 feet long, a slab of imported mahogany. Vanessa sat at the head, Sterling opposite her. Michael and I were on the sides. So, Vanessa, Sterling said, slicing into his turkey with surgical precision. The brand identity is strong. The numbers for Q4 look extraordinary. And the debt load? Sterling asked, taking a sip of wine. Minor, Vanessa waved her hand. The diamonds on her wrist catching the light. Bridge loans. Standard operating leverage. They will be cleared immediately upon closing. Lies. Pure distilled lies. She was building a skyscraper on quicksand, and she was smiling while the ground liquefied. Arthur, Vanessa called out, seeing Sterling look at me. She wanted to control the narrative. She wanted to neutralize the variable. You're being quiet, Mr. Sterling. My father-in-law is retired. He spends his days playing checkers at the center. It keeps him busy. The table chuckled politely. Actually, I said, clearing my throat. The sound was loud in the room. I've been studying. Vanessa laughed. Card tricks? No, I said, locking eyes with Sterling. I joined an investment group. Distressed debt. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Arthur, honey, leave the finance to the professionals. You might lose your pension. I don't think I will, I said calmly. I picked up my wine glass. The returns are quite substantial. Suddenly, the massive flat-screen TV mounted on the wall, which Vanessa had insisted be on mute with news running for ambiance, flashed a red banner. Breaking news? Market update. Mr. Sterling looked up, his eyes narrowed. Turn that up. Michael, the volume. Michael grabbed the remote, his hand shaking so badly he dropped it. He fumbled, picked it up, and pressed the button. Shocking development in the retail sector. The acquisition of Veritech by Omnicorp appears to be in jeopardy. Vanessa dropped her fork. It clattered loudly on the china. The anchor continued, her face grim. Sources say Veritech's primary creditor, Apex Capital, has sold its entire debt portfolio to a new private entity, Ironwood Holdings. Vanessa stood up. Her chair scraped violently against the floor. Who is Ironwood Holdings? Her phone started buzzing on the table. Then Michael's phone. Then Sterling's. A cacophony of ringtones. Ironwood Holdings has immediately called in the loans, citing breach of contract, fraudulent inventory practices, and insolvency. Mr. Sterling stood up, ice in his eyes. The warmth was gone. You told me the debt was managed. It is, Vanessa screamed, her composure shattering like the glass walls she loved. This is sabotage. This is a mistake. I don't know who Ironwood is. It's not sabotage, I said. My voice cut through the room like a blade. It wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of absolute truth. Everyone turned to look at me. The string quartet stopped playing. The silence was deafening. Arthur, Michael whispered, his face gray. Ironwood, I said, taking a sip of wine. It's the tree in the backyard. Sarah loved that tree. It's tough. It doesn't bend. Vanessa stared at me. Her mouth opened and closed, searching for words that wouldn't come. You? She rasped. You? You don't have that kind of money. You're a pensioner. You're nobody. I didn't use my money, I said. I used the leverage you gave me. You over-leveraged the house. You created the distressed asset. I bought the debt for 20 cents on the dollar. You owed $4 million. I paid one. You own my company? I own your mistakes, I said. I pulled a document from my pocket, the affidavit signed by Robert. I slid it down the long table to Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling, I said, I am the sole proprietor of Ironwood Holdings. As of 4:00 p.m. today, I hold 51% of Veritech via debt-to-equity conversion clauses triggered by default. I took a bite of my roll. It was dry, but it tasted like victory. And I am refusing the acquisition offer. Refusing? Sterling asked, picking up the affidavit. Why? It's millions. You could be rich, because the company is a fraud, I said. The numbers are cooked. The inventory isn't organizing bins. Bricks? Sterling asked, reading the paper. Check storage unit 404 on South Main, I said. It's full of masonry. Sterling looked at Vanessa. He saw the terror in her eyes. He saw the guilt. He nodded to his team. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. Let's go. No, Vanessa screamed, grabbing his arm. He's lying. He's senile. He hates me. Don't listen to him. Sterling shook her off with a look of pure contempt. He just saved me $10 million in a federal investigation, Sterling said. Goodbye. The Omnicorp team walked out. The heavy front door clicked shut. The room was silent. The waiters had vanished into the kitchen, sensing the violence in the air. Vanessa fell into her chair. She looked small, deflated. The air had been let out of the balloon. Why, she whispered. We were going to be rich. We were going to win. You were going to be criminals, I said. You forged my signature. You stole my name. You bet my life. I pointed to the affidavit on the table. She looked at it. She saw Robert's name. He told you. He didn't want to go to jail. I said. He chose his freedom over your secret. I looked at Michael. He was crying, silent, heaving sobs that shook his whole body. I gave you a chance, Mike, I said. In the garage, I begged you to tell me the truth. You chose her lie over your father. You ruined us, Vanessa hissed, venom returning to her voice. I saved the house, I said. My house, because I paid off the land you put on it. As the creditor, I forgave the mortgage on the property. The house is mine again, free and clear. But Veritech is done. I'm liquidating it tomorrow, selling the assets to pay back the legitimate vendors. The ones you screwed over. And us? She asked. You're unemployed? I said. And since the company leased this house from the trust, and I now control the company, you're evicted. You can't do that, Michael sobbed. We're family. Dad, please. Yes, I was standing up. My knees didn't hurt. For the first time in years, I stood straight. We are? And that's why I'm not calling the police about the forgery. That's my gift to you, freedom from prison. I'm giving you a clean slate. No money, but no jail time. I walked over to the dessert cart. I picked up a small pumpkin tart. But you won't live here. You won't live off me. You won't use my name to steal. I suggest you start packing, I said, turning to the door. The locks change in the morning. And Vanessa, take your boots off when you leave. I don't want you scratching my floors. My legs shook as I walked away, but I didn't stop. The beam had held. The load was carried. The structure stood, even if the inhabitants were gone. The weeks after Thanksgiving were quiet, a heavy, necessary silence. Michael and Vanessa moved into a small apartment across town. It was a one-bedroom walk-up. Real life. No Scandinavian oak. No marble. Just linoleum and consequences. Vanessa left him 2 months later. Without the money, without the legacy, she had no use for him. He was just another accessory she couldn't afford. I moved back into the big house. It needed work. The statement architecture was already leaking. The roof had failed in the first heavy snow. 6 months later, on a warm May afternoon, I heard a knock at the door. I checked the security camera. It was Michael. He looked different. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing work boots and jeans. He looked thinner, older, but his eyes were clear. The fog of alcohol and fear was gone. I opened the door. "Dad," he said. He didn't try to hug me. He stood on the porch, respectful of the boundary. "Mike," I said. "I heard you were renovating," he said, looking at the pile of lumber in the driveway. I was wondering if you needed a hand. I know how to frame. You taught me. I don't want money," he added quickly. I want to work. I want to build something real. I want to fix it." I looked at his hands. They were soft, but they were my son's hands. "The pay's minimum wage," I said. "And you take orders from the foreman." "Which is me." He smiled. A real, humble smile. The first one I had seen in years. "I can do that."
"I'll grab a hammer,"
I said, stepping back and opening the door wide. We walked into the house together. It was a mess of dust and broken beams. The fancy glass walls were coming down, but the foundation, the deep earth pilings I had insisted on checking, was solid. And for the first time in a long time, I knew it would hold. Thanks for walking this journey with us all the way. With Arthur and Michael in mind, was this ending how it should have happened? Or should Arthur have turned Michael away? Let us know in the comments.